I've never listened to a Taylor Swift album before, and with the recent widespread discussion surrounding Taylor's new album and 2026 Grammy Awards ceremony just around the corner, I thought now would be a better time than ever to listen to her whole discography for the first time. And I want to address that, yes, I did listen to the Taylor's versions, but for the most part, they just kind of feel like cash grab deluxe editions, and good for Taylor for owning the rights to all of her music now, not just the Taylor's versions. But I won't be ranking them in this video because they don't really add or detract from my opinion or my enjoyment that much more from the original versions. And all of the From the Vault tracks feel like just bonus tracks we would find in any other deluxe edition of an album. But I will confess there are some great additions and re-recordings on those versions. So with that being said, I'm going through every album in chronological order of release, and please understand these are just my first impression opinions coming from someone who is not chronically tapped into all of the lore and someone who's probably not the target audience for this kind of music. So join me as I go headfirst, fearless into haunted, treacherous, uncharted territory, back to the start of it all in 2006. You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pleasantly surprised. This is actually very good album. I think the biggest detractor for people and even Swifties I've heard from the very same fan base is that this album is deeply rooted and entrenched in an early country sound, and maybe that's the case. While I was a bit shocked to hear a noticeable difference in style and inflections of Taylor's voice on this album, it really isn't as twangy as people chalk it up to be. And I think for the most part, the banjos, the fiddles, the guitar passages actually complement the songwriting pretty well. You know, they know exactly when to swell and when to refrain. And speaking of the songwriting, considering Taylor was only 16 when she released this project, the writing is actually quite mature and impressive. So yeah, the only main drawbacks to me is that there are a few moments here and there that give an early 2000s live action Disney show vibe, which is a double-edged sword because part of me enjoys that nostalgic vibe from this sound, from this era, but another part of me just wishes there was a little bit more variety to the production. But on the other hand, this is just a fun power pop, country, pop rock record. No need to read too deeply into it or set profound, lofty expectations for it. So my favorite tracks have to be Teardrops on My Guitar, A Place in This World, and A Place in This World might actually be in contention for me for one of my favorites in her entire discography as a whole. It really is that good to me. I mean, the lyrics are just so accepting of her situation, yet empowering to say, I know this sucks, but I'm gonna make it through. And the chorus is just so bittersweet and yet so satisfying and righteous. So I absolutely love this one. I would also nominate Stay Beautiful, Should Have Said No, and I'm Only Me When I'm With You, which is the deluxe bonus track that I found out later. Still a great song. This album feels like I'm shopping for trinkets while I wait for my table at the Cracker Barrel in the South somewhere, in the best way possible. So yeah, this album is just very endearing, very charming. If you're gonna argue that any album by her is camp, it would be this one, and perhaps a bit blasphemous, but I would actually put it in the A. 2008 with Fearless, and yeah, just wow. She avoided the sophomore slump, and this may spoil the rest of the video, but this is my personal favorite Taylor Swift album, and that's not to say that Taylor doesn't find pockets of genius in the future or that some of my favorite individual songs aren't coming up, but I believe this is her most consistent album as a track list with little to no filler. I really tried finding weak points in this record, but it truly is just banger after banger after banger after banger, anthem after anthem after anthem after anthem, endlessly singable, just good vibes. The songwriting and the storytelling is much more attention grabbing, it's more engaging, it's stickier to me, and Taylor just finds this sweet spot, this perfect balance between leaning into pop formulas and pop conventions while still having her own unique spin and her own identity attached to it by holding on to country backed instrumentation still. I mean, the melodic hooks on this album are just so catchy. Like how can you not get into this at least a little bit? Lyrically, Taylor is talking about relationships, this give and take dynamic. You know, we missed each other by this much, anxieties, worries, infatuation, insecurities about herself. He said, she said, you weren't there for me, how could you? And that's what I love about this era. It's self-aware, it's confronting her own shortcomings, limitations, but it's not stopping her from at least trying. And I just love that kind of stuff lyrically. The only lull in the track list for me would probably be The Best Day. And so my favorite tracks would have to be this self-titled Fearless, Love Story, obviously, that key change on the third chorus with the marriage proposal, You Belong With With Me is a classic too. The Way I Loved You, the vocal pitch bend into that G minor on the pre-chorus, which adds a bit of tension on the word tonight. It's a very, very effective cadence that just gets me every time. Forever and Always as well. But yeah, in general, they're all really my close favorites. The choruses are just super, super strong on all these tracks. The album is just a blast to listen to. Just such an incredibly addicting album. So in the context of her whole discography, I would very safely put in the S. So from the very shallow research I did into the lore and the reception with each record, I heard that a lot of people were upset that Taylor didn't write every single line or song from Fearless. And even if she did really only go halfsies on the writing, I'm not sure why that was really such a point of contention, considering ghostwriters or having other producers or even other artists write songs for you or release your songs is a practice as old as time. So unless she was advertising specifically that it was 100% her own original writing, I don't really see why this was an issue. Maybe people were especially harsh because of the more personal point of view storytelling, but regardless, Taylor responds to that criticism by releasing Speak Now in 2010, a project that is entirely written by her, and overall everything that's great about the previous two albums is on full display here. The aesthetics, production is very similar, and we're starting to get more glimpses of pop and rock expanding past that country home base that we're used to. There were even a few tracks that gave me a pop punk sort of Paramore feel in the best way possible. So yeah, I really admired this project for branching out a bit more with greater sonic variety. Everything from the reverb on the drums to the cleanliness and the presence of the acoustic guitar parts and the tone of the pianos, everything just feels livelier in the mix, like they have more character. And my only downside to this album as a whole is that despite how much I respect Taylor for this songwriting feat, I'm not as interested in all of the writing personally. And despite there being some incredible highs, I think there's just a bit more forgettable moments for me to have this record above Fearless. But yeah, obviously many highlights. My favorite tracks have to be Dear John. I love the pacing to that song, and I learned through this album that Taylor is talking about John Mayer, like the same John Mayer that wrote Neon and Your Body's a Wonderland and Waiting on the World to Change. John Mayer, isn't that guy kind of old? The song Mean, just pure country roots bliss, super catchy. Same goes with The Story of Us. Those tracks are just earworms. The song Never Grow Up, may or may not have shed a tear listening to that song. Not really sure who said that. The song Long Live, fantastic, great send-off, and one of her best finale and closer tracks in my opinion. So it sucks that I have to evaluate this album as a whole, because if you snip out a few tracks from this project, you would end up with an S tier album in my opinion. So I was going back and forth because the debut and this album are just sort of neck and neck in my head, but as a whole I would give this project an A, and I would probably put it above the debut, but ever so slightly above. I think kind of like how serious Radiohead fans' favorite album tends to be In Rainbows over OK Computer or Kid A. I feel like Red is the In Rainbows of the Taylor Swift fan base, in that a lot of true Swifties often place this album in the top half of her discography, if not first, especially the Taylor's version, but that's just my own brief observation from what I've seen. Looking briefly at the reception to this album and what Taylor herself has spoken about this album, she has gone on record by saying it's not very sonically cohesive, or the styles are kind of just all over the place, and I can definitely see that argument. But the main issue with this album for me is that too many of these songs are just so either bland or cookie cutter. I think a lot of this can be attributed to this stylistic production shift. I mean, we actually hear some synths and a little pop production embellishments that are just so 2010s indie pop coded, but not in the same way that the debut album managed to hang on to those stylistic choices and milk the best parts from them. So I don't know, maybe Taylor's right about the whole sonically cohesive comment. Feels a lot like laying the groundwork for what's to come, a sort of transition phase album. And you know, I was halfway through this album and I thought I accidentally left a YouTube tab open on my browser, and I thought it just decided to autoplay an ad from one of those 20-minute kids craft or life hack slop videos. But no, I had no other tabs open. It just turned out that the song Stay 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 was just playing. So my favorite tracks would have to be I Knew You Were Trouble, All Too Well, and this is one of the cases where if we do count the Taylor's versions, I do actually really like the 10-minute version with what sounds like added saxophone parts too, which is a beautiful touch. The Last Time, another great track featuring Gary Lightbody, and that's really about it. 22 is fun, I guess. So maybe I'm just missing something, some crucial key elements. Yeah, I don't know, maybe I need to just give it some more time, but definitely not my personal favorite, and I would put it in the C tier. So over the years, I think I can safely say this is usually the definitive Taylor Swift pick for the general public. And I guess this fits the bill for the OK Computer of my Radiohead analogy. This is a complete departure from country and just a full embrace of pop aesthetics. I think generally it smooths out a lot of the awkward edges and rough transitional patches that I personally thought there were on Red. But we have Max Martin, Shellback, Jack Antonoff that are just going in a full maximalist pop direction. And it was obviously wildly successful. And I've already heard half of this record just by simply existing on this planet. It's unavoidable. But for every successfully catchy pop tune there is on this album, there's also one annoying, overused pop trope or archetype or cliche to match with it on this album as well. I'm specifically referring to tracks like All You Have to Do Is Stay, Shake It Off, Bad Blood. I don't ever like using the it's overplayed argument to articulate why songs don't have enjoyment. I mean, if you just take Thriller, for example, that's one of the most overplayed, oversold, over anything album there is in human history. And even if Billie Jean or Beat It or Thriller, for that matter, doesn't have the same magic or appeal as it does when you've heard those songs for the first time, you can still acknowledge how solid and locked in those grooves are, or just how iconic the guitar solos or bass lines are. So I don't think some of these songs are annoying just because I hear them in every retail store I step in. The production techniques and writing just make it prone to become stale and outdated over time because of how simple and cliche they feel in a lazy way, or how the writing feels oversimplified to appeal to the lowest common denominator of universal experience. And perhaps it's with the aim of selling the most records and playing in the most amount of retail stores possible. But again, not that there's something wrong with simplicity, but to me this is simplicity that just doesn't feel charming or genuine anymore like the writing on her previous albums do. My favorite tracks would have to be Blank Space, probably the most explosive chorus on this whole album. This one's a banger for sure, I can't deny that. And Style, I really like the constant driving groove on this one. Wildest Dreams as well, I actually like the melody on this one, and for the longest time I had no idea this was a Taylor Swift song until going back and listening to this album. The song Clean as well, I really like the plucky little indie-tronica percussion that fills the mix. Just a great tune at its core, and maybe my favorite lyrics on the whole album too. So yeah, overall I have mixed feelings about this album. I would probably put it in the B tier, and I do enjoy it over Red. Could have never predicted a timeline in the multiverse where Taylor Swift and Future join forces to be on the same song. Here we are. Songwriting chops, interesting storytelling, catchy production just gets thrown out the window. I understand this album is meant to be a response to all the backlash she was getting online, and I do commend her for having the courage to respond this way. And there is a goldmine of things to write about and get deeply personal and vulnerable, but instead the writing just chooses to be super generic and surface level in a way that it reads as almost cryptic, and it doesn't get to the heart of her turmoil or her tumult, but instead is just so obsessed with putting on this front or this facade that she's bulletproof and could not be bothered with all the drama that she's facing. And that's a totally valid and commendable position to take if she's in hot water online, but the way it's delivered just feels so forced and, again, just disingenuous. It kind of feels like listening to an AI interpretation of Taylor trying to be rebellious and contrarian, and I can see how this album would be 10 times more interesting if you were keeping up with the latest Taylor Swift lore and you've been following every post since the Tumblr days, every paparazzi picture, every tweet, every relationship. But maybe it's just because I'm uninitiated that it's something that I don't really care for or don't really feel like looking deeper into. So yeah, all I'm trying to say is sometimes we don't make the best decisions when we're upset. And just to give you a taste of the riveting poetic lines featured on this album, they say I did something bad. Is it chill? Is it chill that you're in my head? Look what you made me do. But I do bad things with you, so it goes. I can't say anything to your face, because look at your face. And in the very same song, we have, you make me so happy it turns back to sad. That one's a little bit confusing. This is why we can't have nice things, darling. Because you break them. I had to take them away. My favorite track is probably Getaway Car. I'm going to put this album in the D, and we're going to move on. I will admit this album grew on me quite a bit, and it's honestly very refreshing to hear Taylor in a better headspace after Reputation, and I think that's reflected quite well in the confidence and uplifting instrumentals across this album. Now, despite the sentiment, do all the super positive, over the top at times vibes go over well for me all the time personally? No, not always, or not always super consistently, but as a whole this feels like a much more comfortable, familiar, confident space for Taylor to be in. So most of the time this confident feels genuinely very empowering. Other times it feels a little forced and overblown, but I do vibe with the overall sentiment on the whole. This is just a very polarizing album for me, making it hard to rank altogether. It sits on the edge where some tracks have just the right amount of positive energy and feel good production, and for every one of those tracks there's just one that overdoes it just a little bit and is blown out of proportion where I just can't really stomach it. And then there's a few tracks that I just feel a little bit indifferent about, but my favorite tracks overall would have to be Cool Summer. This one is just a banger and a half, just such a satisfying chorus. There's no doubt about that. Just out of curiosity, because I like this song so much, I looked into the song credits and it says Annie Clark of St. Vincent fame actually has a writing credit on this song. Just makes a lot of sense, that's all I'm saying. And the track Lover as well, it's a great ballad. Feels reminiscent of previous eras lyrically in terms of the storytelling. So that was another track that was refreshing to hear. The song I Think He Knows as well, and you just have to hear me out that this is one of the exceptions where it just goes so over the top that it just works. And I know the vocal delivery is a little bit tedious, but if I could just have one campy song to enjoy as a guilty pleasure, it would probably be this one. It just feels so wrong to like this one, but I have to be honest, that really is a good track. The groove just goes too hard and I have really no choice but to succumb to it. Same goes with the song Cornelia Street as well as Death by a Thousand Cuts. For that track specifically, those keys just doing arpeggios or whatever in the background, absolutely crazy production. I really loved hearing that song. Definitely one of my favorite textures on the whole album. I really like the song Afterglow as well. So for me, the highs and lows balance each other out in kind of a net zero in a sense. So for that reason, I would put it in the C tier. I don't think it quite reaches the B tier where a project like 1989 or gets to the height of a Speak Now, but I really do enjoy it more than Red, once again. So this really feels like a complete reinvention for Taylor Swift. We have an indie folk record, an indie folk direction, a lot of atmosphere, strings, quiet piano, contemplative acoustic guitars and the like. Honestly, this album does not feel like listening to Taylor Swift at all. Maybe it's just the overwhelming saturation of pop production that I've heard for the past 3 or 4 albums by her. So this is a significantly more admirable effort in terms of just the meticulous attention to detail in the production and the writing. The whole Cardigan, August, Betty love triangle was very entertaining to see play out and just kind of mind-blowing to discover, weaving the story into the structure of the album. So I do want to talk about the lyrics for a second. I think it's worth mentioning the song The Last Great American Dynasty for presenting a great social commentary on the life of Rebecca Harkness and the bad rap and backlash she faced, which parallel very similarly to Taylor's. Then we have the track Exile with Bon Iver with an amazing reference to film. Once again, that film motif of how film structures, common plot points, and archetypes that play out in a packaged way, or just the uncertainty of how a film left without resolution, without finality, or is left to just wonder what could have been if the events continued to play out. So Taylor and Justin both playing their respective counterparts was just an incredibly satisfying dichotomy to see. 2 sides of a broken relationship. You know, you have the lines to reference, "You're not my homeland, I'm not your problem, you never gave me signs, I gave you so many signs." Absolutely class writing. I also like the color symbolism on the track Invisible String, from referencing new beginnings to a timeline of this relationship, a passing of time, a passing of season, various allusions to mythology as well. And in a way, it's a return to her roots and a back to basics moment for Taylor, where this is actually quite a stripped back album if you think about it, at least compared to all of her blatant pop records. And so when that's the case, the writing really has to shine and the melodies have to carry. You don't have any grand or flashy production tricks to compensate for you or to fill in the gaps. But despite all that, Taylor consistently delivers on this project, that's for sure. I'm actually in awe that this album exists in the same discography as Reputation, and my only nitpick is that while there is a great consistency across the track list for having great high quality production and instrumental palettes, it does get a tad bit homogenous and it feels like it's meandering at times from the production standpoint. So yeah, my favorite tracks would have to be Exile with Bon Iver, My Tears Ricochet, August, Illicit Affairs, and Betty. So yeah, this is just a great album, a great addition to the catalog. If there was just a bit more sonic variety and a tightening of the track list, I would probably put it in the S tier, but I think it can sit very proudly in the A tier, and I would put it above these two as well. So now we have a second helping of great contemplative, smart indie folk tunes. Taylor is just doubling down on the limited time offer in the LL Bean clearance sale vibes. But jokes aside, this is everything great about folklore to me and then some. And I watched something somewhere saying this was Taylor proving that this artsy indie stint was not just a pandemic fluke. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think this record is truly an improvement on all fronts. And that was really my biggest complaint with folklore. And that already great record was that it felt a little bit too thin and meandering at points. And I think what Taylor got very right on this album is that these songs cut very deep and to the heart of what Taylor wants to bring across. So there's just absolutely no fluff on this album. The songwriting and structure is a lot more clear cut, direct, and concise. I think these songs are stronger in their melody, stronger in delivery and conviction as well. And once again, Taylor pulls together some credited features from the likes of the Haim Woman. Finally, we have features from The National as well as Bon Iver once again, and the production is reflective of that. Once again, this album does not feel like listening to Taylor Swift at all. It takes its time in unraveling these sonic landscapes. It doesn't take as much time as it did on Folklore in my opinion, but the guitar timbres, the atmospheres, they just feel a bit more nuanced on this project in comparison to her previous work. This album isn't trying to reinvent pop or genre bend or fuse styles necessarily, but its power lies in its stripped back quality and just super solid songs. And lyrically as well, this album is just incredibly satisfying. We have this being on the wrong page with the relationship on Champagne Problems, lines like your heart was glass, I dropped it, indicating the other side of the relationship with the level of vulnerability ready to propose, but the narrator side shattering that vision completely, or the internal tension and driving rhythms on Gold Rush, where the narrator struggles with their own impulses to daydream or fantasize over this person, with moments of succumbing to this desire, like with lines like, what must it be like to grow up that beautiful? The song Tolerate It. I mean, what a tragic narrative. Romanticizing and thinking so highly of someone, bending over backwards for someone just for them to hardly notice or simply tolerate it after you just poured out all your love and soul for this person. The track Happiness as well has an incredibly mature moment of healing with the line, I can't make it go away by making you a villain. The track Ivy as well parallels this forbidden affair with lines like, in a faith forgotten lands, in from the snow, your touch brought forth an incandescent glow, tarnished but so grand. This secret relationship being compared to this invasive barbed ivy that inevitably grows and envelops her house of stone. So those were just a few lines and lyrical themes that really cut deep for me personally, and my favorite tracks would have to be Willow, Tolerate It, No Body No Crime, Dorothy, and Evermore. So yeah, of the two related sort of sister albums during this pandemic era, I do prefer Evermore over Folklore, and it's going to be the second album that I would put in the S tier. I'm not really sure what happens, Taylor. I mean, this album feels kind of like a gust of wind. You know, it's here in 1 second, and another second, it's gone. The ideas, the songwriting, the production is just so flatlined. It's so bland and scant. It's kind of like a monotone hum that can blend into the background. And I understand this is supposed to be a more low-key collection of late-night introspective pieces, but Taylor has already proven that she is more than capable of writing more minimalistic ballads with plenty of substance. I would just look at her previous two albums albums that I just talked about, or any of the quieter moments on her earlier eras. So I don't really know what happened here. I don't even feel like reading into the lyrics, honestly. I mean, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. So my favorite tracks, I guess I would pick Lavender Haze and Karma. You know, at least these tracks have some semblance of a pulse or a sign of life. Maybe I'm just being dramatic. Yeah, I would put it in the D tier. I don't think it's as bad as Reputation, but I would put it here. So around track 4 or 5, I actually did fall asleep listening to this album, and I had to take many breaks. I had to consume this album in chunks. This thing was just a chore to get through. I could be biased. Maybe I just have listener fatigue after listening to almost exclusively Taylor Swift the past couple of weeks, and maybe I'm just being critically dishonest by not giving the writing and lyrics a chance anymore. But when the production or the harmonic or melodic ideas are just so done after and so lazy and uninteresting, I really just have no desire to go back to re-listen or to sift through lyrics just to find some redeemable quality about this thing. So I do sincerely apologize on that front. I will admit I am being a little bit unfair and dishonest in that department, but truly the only thing that got me through this album was the ever diminishing sliver of hope that I had that maybe a single redeemable track was coming up. But that was soon proven to be a futile and foolish effort. So my favorite tracks, if I had to pick some, I guess maybe Fortnite with Post Malone, maybe the song I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, just for the synths alone, just maybe. I mean, those were the only tracks that kept me somewhat awake. So yeah, it's without a doubt going into the D tier, and you know what, it has to go below Reputation, because at least Reputation kept me somewhat engaged by just the shock value alone. And I know I've already cheated this album enough, but please do not make me listen to the anthology. I don't think I can stomach another helping of this era anymore. So finally, here we are, the infamous, the notorious, the life of a showgirl, the record I've been hearing just so much negativity about, and we have some dancier throwback four on the floor grooves. That's an aesthetic that's really gotten a resurgence and has been really popular with this new wave of pop girlies we've been getting as of late, and for the most part it's executed pretty well on this album. Sparkly and muted synths alike are very reminiscent of this glamorous high production theater era and are actually quite tasteful for the most part. The super dry driving drums are actually sounding pretty good too, and it's just an interesting full circle moment that at the start of Taylor's career, that country sound is known for more wet, cavernous, reverbed drum mixes that contribute to that fully blown out live instrumentation feel. And here we are at the latest record, nearly 20 years later, with a fully transformed polar opposite sound. So I guess the only notable observations I have would be on track 7, Actually Romantic, just a very eerily similar chord progression to Where's My Mind by the Pixies. The 8th song, Wish Lists, for me missed the mark lyrically, but I think the sentiment was in the right place, kind of like when Frank Ocean just wanted 2 kids in a swimming pool, but he's not brave. The line boss up, settle down, that was kind of cringe though. And we have the 9th song, Wood, for some reason just gave me I Want You Back by the Jackson 5 vibes. So as a collective set of tracks, I feel like this album actually had the potential to be this grand, over the top, deep commentary statement piece of Taylor unfairly being this laughingstock or its public target of constant both praise and backlash for being quite possibly the most famous woman on the planet. But instead, this project just decided to be so degenerate and deaf and cringe in the lyrical department, because the production overall, sure, while generic at times, was actually not that bad, even if it feels like Taylor is playing a little bit of a catch-up game to today's pop sphere. So my favorite tracks would have to be The Fate of Ophelia, Elizabeth Taylor, Ruin the Friendship, Wishlist. Even though this tedious melodic hook, it grew on me a little bit, even though I cringe every time I hear the boss up line. So yeah, I don't think this is Taylor's worst record. It feels a bit novelty, I guess, and for that reason I would put it at the top of the D tier. So this is my final ranking. Very even spread of albums across the board. As you can see, I am quite biased to the older eras, and that's not to say there aren't moments of greatness that Taylor finds when branching out into different styles and sonic landscapes. The pandemic era albums being Exhibit A, and whether these experiments panned out for the best or didn't produce authentic quality songs, you have to respect Taylor for fighting for her music and having the courage to expand her sound out at least a little bit. And at the end of the day, you can tell she really does care about being a songwriter, being a music fan first and foremost, giving props to the legends that she looks up to, and just serving her loyal, very loyal fan base, even if the music sometimes can come across just a bit out of touch coming from a millennial billionaire. Thank you all for watching, and let me know what you think about Taylor Swift's discography as a whole. What do you believe are the best eras, the worst albums, all the mid that's in between? And if you're watching this and you're currently a very angry, fuming Swiftie, I would love to hear your insider perspective as well. Feel free to fill me in on some of the lore that I missed in the comments, and subscribe if you for some reason enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.